Good afternoon. So sorry for the delay. Bonjour, je m'appelle Marilou Loncol Daigneault. I'm a business analyst at CMF Program Administrator. And this presentation today is going to be in English. Just please note, on va faire la même présentation en français demain à notre kiosque virtuel à 2h30. Donc, prenez-en bonne note si vous préférez avoir cette présentation en français. Alors, je vous vois pas. J'espère que vous êtes là puis que ça va bien malgré l'absence de petits goodies puis de petits bonbons. Without further ado, so basically the purpose of this presentation is really to try to help you make the most compelling application to the CMF. I've built this presentation is kind of like a training, keeping in mind the most seen pitfalls and the weak points of the applications that we get, and really trying to improve the quality of the project applications. And why is that? Because this program, the prototyping program, is definitely the most popular and competitive program of amongst all the CMF experimental stream programs. So it's also one of the most interesting because when you have a project idea in mind, you need to start somewhere, and prototyping is really a good place to start. So I would say, as simple as it seems, just start by reading the guidelines, first step, carefully. So this presentation also has in mind that you are somewhat familiar with the prototyping program, but if you're not yet, some of this material will help you get more familiar with the evaluation criteria. The next step would also be to really take advantage of the service that the CMF provides. We provide pre-eligibility consultations so that you can prepare, discuss with analysts like myself or like Monica, who's online. Oh, by the way, I forgot to introduce her. She's online as well, and she's there to help you with your questions if they arise during the presentation. For most, if you don't mind, go through the presentation and we'll keep the major questions for the end of the presentation. However, if there are glitches in the middle of the presentation or anything that's more burning, you can definitely intervene on the chat, and Monica and I will address them the best we can. So, as I was saying, do take advantage of the pre-eligibility consultations. For this year, the deadlines are passed for 2020, and the next deadline will be in 2021. So you can already start thinking about discussing with the business analyst maybe in late January or February. That would be about 3 months ahead of the next deadline, just to make sure that your project is eligible, and so is your company. Because as you'll see in the next couple of minutes, preparing a CMF application is a lot of work. It's going to take you a lot of time. It's worth it because the financing conditions are really good, and it's a really good place to start. But you need to put a lot of work in this, and you just want to make sure that if you're going to put all this work in the project, you really want your project to be eligible, because otherwise it will be just refused at the gate and you won't even be assessed. So, as I said, I suggest to start early, a few months before. That's kind of one of the best tips I can give. All right. So the evaluation grid that's in the guiding principles is really what we use to evaluate your project. So you really need to master that grid, but you need to strike a balance, but don't lose sight of what makes your project special. Hello? Oh, okay. What makes your project stand apart, and the reasons that brought you here to begin with, why you think your game is awesome, why you think it's going to be fun, and what really creates that spark into that wants you to create a new game. So really focus on that. And then you need to, next step, I said demonstrate, is really where all the arguments come into play is it's really about justifying. And that's really a word that I'm going to repeat a lot: demonstrate and justify, because it's really a project application is really, it's not quite like a pitch. It's really like an essay. It's really all written. And the person that will be evaluating your project won't be able to speak with you. So they need to have all the answers that they need to, and ensure that it fits with the evaluation criteria. And so they need this in writing. And also plan and plan your project in terms of financing and in terms of a production calendar, well, prototyping calendar in this case, is a lot of work, as you see, but it's an essential piece of a successful application. And it's beyond CMF financing, it's really something anticipating the needs of your projects in terms of resources and in terms of time, in terms of money, in terms of specialties. If you need special talents, is really essential, and it's going to help you get a better project at the end of the day. Oops, some of the things are not showing, but anyways, there was on the slide there was a big heart. So essentially, it's like you need to know your project in detail, really make sure you have a clear vision. If it's not clear, work hard until you get there, and give it all the love it deserves, a lot of time, a lot of justification again, and really master the evaluation criteria, because it's about fitting your project within the grid. And the grid is the same for everyone. So it's not, there's no magic recipe, there's no one size fits all, but once you understand the evaluation criteria, you can really find a way to write your project application that will make your project shine and really stand apart from the crowd, because we do get a lot of projects, and a lot of them are really good, and so the program is really competitive. So you really need to make sure that we get all the information that we need in order to make the best assessment of your project. So again, as I started to say at the beginning of the presentation, the most common reasons for losing points, because it's a scoring system, and the highest scores get the financing. And so you need to have the highest score as possible. And if there's missing information or incomplete information or information that just doesn't match the evaluation criteria, that's often where the points get lost. So that's just make sure you don't fall into these traps, and really get to know the criteria and use all the tools that are available to you. The evaluation grid, that's found in the guiding principles. We also have a checklist to make sure that you don't forget anything, because we're asking for quite a few documents. Just make sure you don't forget anything. And also you have the pre-consultation appointments, where we can spend an hour on the phone with you to make sure your project is eligible, but you can also note any questions you have about the application process. So the rest of the presentation is really based on evaluation criteria. I really took them one by one and tried to kind of break them down and explain get a sense of what's expected in those criteria. So when you're presenting your team, what's really important is take your time to really demonstrate the success, both in terms of the track record. What is this your first game, or have you produced and commercialized a couple of them? If so, how was it? Was it successful commercially or critically? Did you win any awards? That's where we're going to talk about that. In terms of your team personnel, same principle goes there. Demonstrate, what's their track record, did they win any awards, and what their qualifications are. but also do take the time to specify what are their roles within the project. Don't just take the time to present your team. Don't just throw resumes in there and just leave it to the reader to connect the dots. We really need to make the connection between the qualifications and the proposed roles. And if there's anything special in your project, like a special kind of expertise, if your project is more heading into an innovation track for the further steps, you might need some special scientists or whatnot, or some researchers or experts in a particular field. Well, that's going to be really important. So do take the time to plan for that. Plan it in your team. You're going to need to plan it in your budget as well. As many of you might know, we also provide some points for gender parity. You don't need to write anything about this. We really, you just need to make sure that you read all the small prints in the budget, and all the positions that are accounted for the parity calculation are highlighted in green in the budget. And of course, no need to mention that it needs to actually be real. So because if you do get the financing for for your project, and based on the parity points that you receive, we will need to monitor and make sure that these positions are real throughout the entire business relationship with the CMF. Now that's where it gets more interesting as well. And so since the prototyping program is kind of it finances all the steps you need to take until you have a viable prototype, a functional prototype. So some projects are going to be more, there's like 2 tracks in the prototyping programs. Because some of the projects are going to be really innovative. Some of them might have more of a commercial potential. And this will translate it further at the next phase, when you're going to be more you'll have a viable prototype in hand, and you want to get your project financed for the production. You'll have to choose between 2 different programs. And one will be the commercial, and the other is innovation. But these criteria right now, at this stage, they are there to try to assess the quality and the potential of the project. So in terms of so in the criteria family that's called originality, creativity, and advancement, really that's where, remember when we spoke about what's special in your project, that's where really you need to discuss this, and in terms of content, in terms of form as well. So everything that is very particular to your projects, really provide as many examples as you can, so that we can get the gist of what's your vision, what's your direction. Do you have a special art direction? What's the what are the characters going to be like, or is you have a very distinctive narratives, or you have something special in terms of soundtrack. So those are all aspects that you need to discuss in writing, but I would also encourage you to use the possibility of adding additional material, mock-ups or short video or sound samples to your project, so that we can get really good idea of, what is this going to be, what's the atmosphere, what this game is going to be like. And you also need to think of your game in terms of how is it compared to other games in the genre. So when you're defining originality, when we're trying to demonstrate that your project is original, well, it needs to be, you can't just say it's original. Why? You need to demonstrate it. It needs to be compared with other comparable projects. So that's really where you're going to need to do your homework and research what are the comparable games and how. And really, that's going to help you trace what's special, distinctive, what's original in your game. So that second family of criteria, quality, sophistication, and of design and programming, is also is a little bit similar. It's the same principle. You're going to need to discuss design, and also you can use your additional material. One thing that is often overlooked and that is really important, because there are a lot of points that are allocated to this criteria is your technical direction. So don't take for granted that this is really something that you need to discuss, that and explain what's going to be, how, are there any technical challenges? Because if you're positioning your project as something very innovative technologically, of course we'll expect to know, okay, what's so special about it, or, what kind of work does it involve, etc. And you can feel safe. You don't need to worry about disclosing your secrets. Our team, everyone here at the CMF and Telefilm program administrator for the CMF are bounded by confidentiality agreements. So we do expect you to disclose any special technological recipe that you have, and we're not going to communicate it, and everything in your project application is strictly confidential. So this is not a concern. The only portion of your project that is of your project application that is not confidential is the project summary that you provided to be disclosed to the media. So that's the rest, you don't need to worry about it. Your UX, that's super important. The user experience. How is your game going to be fun? How are you going to make everything coherent, and what interesting functionalities are you envisioning, and what are the core mechanics, any retention mechanics? So this is also something you need to discuss. And again, so like it was the case for the other criteria, when we're talking about originality or distinctiveness, this should flag you. You should be thinking about, okay, how is it original? How is it distinct? So how is it compared to other games, compared to other comparable games in the genre, etc. So you need to kind of think of your game in its environment and how it positions itself. And that's also going to help you later on in the market study. Technology, we discussed it a little bit here. We assess it more in more details, and especially if this is a criteria that gives points to technological innovation. So if your project is strong both in terms of technological innovation, but also in design innovation, that's a really good way to get a high score. And not all projects do a lot of games. Most games use the same engines and the same recipes. So sometimes it's more like content-based or form-based innovation. But if your project is different in that way, you can definitely get more points there, and that's going to help you stand out. So financial viability, very important here. So one of the most difficult things to do when you're planning your project at this stage is to plan your budget. So start early. I put a couple of prompts there to help you plan, and budget is super important. We use it, we read it with the team, but also it helps us assess what the project's risk and how is it well planned. Do you have the correct resources? Are they confirmed? So do take the time to read all the small prints in the budget grid, and also provide as many details as you can in the description, so that we can understand fully what your intentions are. Please do not put any TBDs, or as less as possible. Again, this is a really competitive program. You want to convey and show that you are ready to do this. So if you're ready to do this, not all your team is TBD. You need to know who's going to work on this, for how long, how much is going to cost. And of course, it's sometimes difficult without all the business intelligence. But this is really, here we're trying to push you so that you do get this business intelligence and get a plan that is as accurate as possible. The financial structure. So as some of you know, the CMF can finance up to 75% of a project's cost. So that means that you need to come up with at least 25% of the financing. So you need to think about how you're going to come, where the money is going to come from, what sources are you proposing, or what are the risks of these sources, and so and of course here you want to come up with sources that are as less to have as less risky as possible. So really try to make sure that all your sources are viable and confirmed. And if you're not sure about these kind of strategic decisions, this is definitely something that you can note for a call with the CMF, with myself, with Monica, with someone else from our team. And this is definitely something that we can discuss during the pre-eligibility meeting, because you could lose points there, and it's a really important criteria. And this definitely so what we're really trying to assess there is we need to see that you committed to investing, or whatever sources you're proposing is committing, and that this source has the capacity to invest. In the same category, financial viability, we need to assess what's your company's, so we're financing companies, not individuals. What's your company's financial standing? Do you have the means to honor your commitment to invest in projects? So this is what we're assessing. So this is why we ask for your financial statements. If you don't have any financial statements, we'll need the closest equivalent, or maybe depending on what your situation is, this is something we can discuss in a pre-eligibility meeting. But otherwise, essentially anything that will give us an idea of what's your company's financial situation. If you're not incorporated yet, well, you're not going to have any financial history, and the risk is going to be higher. But this doesn't prevent us from financing many startups projects through this program. So it's a matter when it comes to scoring. If you have a lower score in this category, you might have a higher score in another category. And at the end of the day, you just need to have like a good enough score. All right, so the risk. Well, this is also related to the other aspects we discussed. This is really trying to assess, okay, who's bearing, what's the financial risk? Is it higher than the norm? The norm is really that the CMF finances more than, finances only 75%, but let's say if you made a mistake there, or if there's like really high financial risk due to your company's financial situation or your revenue model or whatnot, or maybe we see that there's a project completion risk because your project is really poorly planned, well, that's something that's going to stand out and going to be assessed in this criteria. So again, those are, and if you want, we can share the presentation for you to take away if it helps you. Those are a couple of prompts that can help you best plan your project. So even if it's quite early at prototyping stage, we still ask that you start thinking about what's your revenue model going to be. So here we're assessing whether it's going to be relevant. Does it fit? Does your revenue model fit the kind of game, the genre, the platform that you're targeting? If the mobile game, well, maybe you'll want to go freemium or whatever. It depends. It's all a matter of justifying and also like positioning your project within its market and within the trends, and also, so you have a lot of things to think about. You also have to think, okay, is this project and this proposed revenue model, is it going to be eventually, is it going to generate enough revenues for the CMF and you to recoup the CMF investment. So those are the things that you need to think when you're thinking about the revenue model. Strategic positioning in marketing. So we're getting to the end. This is super important. And again, in amongst all the criteria, this is the audience analysis is a criteria in a part of a key part of marketing and strategic planning that is often overlooked, but it's super important. So you need to know who your project's audience going to be, and you really do take the time to get to know them. Who are they? What are their needs? What are their particularities? You could even get their psychological profiles. And really, that's going to help you also design the best possible game that sticks to your intended audience. And if you have a secondary audience, you would do the same kind of planning and assessment. Market analysis. There's kind of two-sided. It's an analysis that speaks to both to the we expect some quantitative data and also qualitative analysis, just because you need to size the market. You know, how big is it and where is it, but also try to get the more like the trends. That's a little bit more. It's less and how it's fluctuating depending on the economy and the consumer habits. That's where also you would discuss, and those are all really useful questions for you to plan your project. Okay, are you trying to enter the market that is super saturated, or is it slowing down? Is it growing? So that's really going to influence how you strategize to really fight for a place for your game within the market, if it's like depending on how competitive or how saturated it is. So that's really going to help you inform your plan and your strategy. So that's why we request you to do this, and so that you find the best tools to get your project noticed. Oh, and one of the last but not least criteria is positioning and competitive advantages. This is super important, and this is not something that can be overlooked. You really we need a competitive analysis. This is essential. Like every project has competition, so we need you to start getting to know who the competition is. Like what are the comparable games, so that you get an idea of how your game positions itself with regards to these other interesting games, because you're going to be competing for those players' time and attention. So you're going to need, that's going to help you define what your competitive advantages are, and that's really important. So that's it for the criteria. To sum up, what I would say is to start early, really early. Use all the resources that you have available to you, whether the online resources on the CMF website with the guiding principles, the checklist to make sure that you didn't forget any documents or information, and use the pre-eligibility assessment service, definitely. And apply when your project is solid enough to be competitive, because you only have 2 attempts by phase per project. Do take the time to address every evaluation criteria, because it's really, I hope if there's one thing that for you to take away today, is I would like you to think of this as you need to kind of adapt your project. Well, your project remains the same, but you need to make it fit in the grid, because that's what's going to be used to provide you points. So really, evaluation criteria are your friends. You need to really know them and understand them and speak to them. And the benefit of starting really early is that you can, take a step back and perhaps have someone that you trust read your proposal and see if what their impressions are. So that could be helpful. I know there's a lot of you helping one another when it's CMF application time. So that's a really good habit, actually. Because we can't review your project application before the deadline. We can only ask for more like neutral program-related questions. We won't make like a qualitative assessment of the project ahead of time, because that would provide you with an unfair advantage compared to other applicants. And if it's a second attempt, and then you would get an evaluation report every time a project is assessed by the CMF. You get a detailed evaluation report, and you can really see where you lost some points, and that can help you inform you what areas need to be improved on to get a higher score. It's not magic, but it can help inform and improve. So if you have any questions, we still have some time left, so I can pass the word to.
Yes, there's already a couple of questions.
Yes.
That are listed. So the first one is in relation to our parity policy.
Yep.
That we talked about earlier. So the question is, how does it relate to non-binary agender people?
We're not there yet. Sorry, I just messed up we're not there yet. I think I understand where this is coming from, but to this day, the way the CMF treats this is really male or female, and there's no like non-binary is not a third category that's accounted for calculating the gender parity at this point. I mean, there are like CMF consultations every year. So if this is something that is important to you, I would really encourage you to bring it up during the consultations, because perhaps it could make a difference.
That's a good point. Our consultations are very important, and we always
and we really need we really need to hear from you when you have like constructive suggestions like that. We can make note of it. I mean, of course, but it's definitely stronger if it comes, perhaps more impactful if it comes directly from our industry base, right? From our clients.
Our other question is, how far does the game have to be in order to participate in the program? Does it need to be already in the creation phase, or is it enough to have the storyboard ready?
I think those are having the storyboard ready. Well, it's a tricky question. I mean, in theory, you would want prototyping would be kind of the first step, right? So it'd be really early, but experience in the fact that the program is so competitive is that what I've observed, in Monica can correct me if I'm wrong, is that sometimes the projects we get so many good projects. It's so competitive that the projects that tend to stand out or be more successful are the ones that are in which some significant planning was already invested in project, or the team already worked hard on the project. And there's so sometimes when you're a little bit more advanced, it can help you. It won't necessarily make a stronger application, but it'll strengthen your chances of conveying a stronger vision of where you're going. So let's say opposing two projects, one that is at really square zero, or has like an idea, and a project that has an idea plus mock-ups plus portions of a storyboard plus like a really good sense of what there has put more thought in planning into it. It's going to be it's going to make a stronger impression in terms of, you know, okay, we know where these folks are going. We get it. We know what's their vision. So that's definitely going to be helpful. But so I hope this kind of helps answer the question. I would say, so more advanced is probably more competitive, but it's not like, it's not
It's not requested, but it goes to what you were saying during your presentation, that they need, you know, to demonstrate, justify. So those are arguments, basically.
Yeah, yeah, but
Arguments.
it can't be too advanced as well. If you, I mean, if you already have a functioning prototype, I would say apply to the production program, not the prototyping phase, because the purpose of this phase is still to create a functional prototype, you know, whether it's a vertical slice or, you know, so you need, so the answer is kind of between the two, like not too advanced, but advanced enough to really convey a strong plan, a strong vision, something compelling.
I have another question. They're basically now asking if they can come to us after going through a round of another fund, like, for example, Ontario Create.
Of course, it depends, but one thing to be careful with, I mean, one thing to be careful is just make sure you actually, do you still need the money, the CMF money? Do you still have prototyping work to do? If the answer is yes, do come to us. If you already have a functional prototype, as I said earlier, you might want to go to production. But if the Ontario Creates or another source is in a financial structure, good for you. That's awesome. The more the merrier. And that might, if that financing is confirmed, it's going to help you come up with a strong financial structure.
I think that's it for the question. I was just answering to someone that was continuing on the discussion. Yeah, I think that's it. Unless someone else will pop in a last minute question.
Well, you have our coordinates there, like on the slide. You see, and I'm in the contacts of the conference. You have my name, my phone number, and my email. So do write. So again, like as a last maybe reminder, is that the pre-consultations, for the next round, I would suggest you start getting in touch with us in let's say mid to late January or February. That's not too early. So just to make sure that your project is eligible. So just so that you don't waste your time talking in huge amounts of time to prepare an application if it's not eligible. But so that's it. Do come and connect with us. So and apply.
And we're getting thanks for the presentations that you can't see, Marilou. Thank
Okay.
you for being there and for your questions.
Well, thank you too. And si vous voulez faire, s'il y a des gens qui veulent voir la présentation, demain on va la faire en français aussi. And maybe one last thing, and we also have like CMF 101 presentation tomorrow at I think it's at 1. Yeah, at 1 tomorrow at our kiosk, at our virtual kiosk. So it's a different presentation. It's more like an overview of the experimental programs beyond the prototyping program. Thank you.
Thank you.